In the summer of 2020, my place of work was a predominantly white institution of higher learning. My university, like many other institutions, posted the Black Lives Matter motto on its website. And it was at that point I knew my Black ass had to exit stage left. And when I exited higher education in 2020, it's because I truly believed I deserve safety. Now, I can finally see that for the longest time, I didn't believe I truly had. I didn't believe I deserved safety when I spent 2 months literally having to ask a program administrator who was racialized as white to open my office doors when she refused to give me access to keys. I didn't believe I deserved safety when I sat through a student's loud vitriol when he proceeded to cuss, discredit, and threaten me in a class full of his peers. I didn't even believe I deserved safety when my immediate supervisor cursed and yelled at me during a scheduled meeting with a colleague. While I had seen the value of having a safe workplace, I truly hadn't made space to embody those beliefs. Now today, I can say with my full chest, I believe that I deserve safety, and I believe that y'all do too. So I want to expand on how confronting my own internalized anti-Blackness has made me whole and better equipped to understand and confront racial terror. I hope y'all like music because I'm inviting the powerful lyrics of Tank and the Bangers to help me amplify my voice. Black sounds like songs, smells like good food, and it tastes like heart disease, but it feels like maze at Jazz Fest. Black sound like something that hurt like a hard test. Black sound like skin, like something dark. It look like hair. Yeah, black sound like rough and good hair. Look like history, sound spiritual. Black sound like years, like working, like night. Black sound like money, look like Walmart, like corner stores, like cash register singing. Black sound like 400 years, smell like Oprah, impactful like Martin, look like Cicely Tyson. The truth is, y'all, we have normalized being sick and tired. We've done this for generations. Our ancestors, especially those who were enslaved, consistently fought to subdue racial terror that had been subsidized by institutional racism and anti-Blackness. We have spent years advocating for equal access under the law while tirelessly working to get folks within and outside our communities to acknowledge the various levels of violence Black folks across the diaspora experience. This work has been just and necessary. However, because so much emphasis in my own life had been placed on conversations about others, I failed to realize how much internalized anti-Blackness had impacted my own sense of self. Now you may be like, Kina, what is anti-Blackness and how is that different from racism? Now, while racism can be understood most often as prejudice, discrimination, or even antagonism directed against the person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular race or ethnic group, or more specifically, racism is often understood as the systemic oppression of a racial group to the social, economic, and or political advantage of other groups. So this is something that we're familiar with. It's a term that we've been using for a long, long time. But let's dig a little deeper here, y'all. Afro-pessimist scholars tell us to approximate what Black people have experienced and continue to experience as simply racism fails to provide an adequate composition of Black lived realities that illuminate the racial grammars of suffering, alienation, exploitation, antagonism, and gratuitous violence against the Black. Other scholars would even tell us that anti-Blackness is not simply racism against Black people, but rather a broader antagonistic relationship between Blackness and the possibility of humanity. And lastly, our good sis Christina Sharp tells us that anti-Blackness is not a pandemic or even an infectious disease, but rather a total climate. And so, if we're gonna keep it a buck here, anti-Blackness is the denial of our humanity. And that happens from people who look like me, and even from people who don't. Studying both Afrofuturism and Afro-pessimism guided me to do the deep work to reflect on the very real and contemporary impacts of anti-Blackness in my life. An anti-Black world is a global entity born out of the weight of chattel enslavement. And to learn more about the direct impact of global anti-Blackness, we can look to the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy. So Dr. Joy DeGruy conceptualized the idea of post-traumatic slave syndrome, a theory that explains the adaptive survival behaviors known as trauma responses in Black communities throughout the United States and the African diaspora. It is a condition that exists as a consequence of multi-generational oppression of Africans and their descendants, resulting from centuries of chattel slavery, a form of slavery that was predicated on the belief that Africans were inherently and genetically inferior to whites. This was then followed by institutionalized racism, which continues to perpetrate injury, thus resulting in key behavioral patterns such as vacant esteem. Now, vacant esteem is one of these key behaviors that Dr. Joy points out. Dr. Joy refers to vacant esteem as the insufficient development of primary esteem, alongside feelings of hopelessness, depression, and a general self-destructive outlook. The second principle she highlights is marked propensity for anger and violence. Marked propensity for anger and violence is the extreme feelings of suspicion, perceived negative motivation of others. It's the violence against self, property. It can even include the violence against members of your own family, friends, or acquaintances. And the last behavior pattern that Dr. Joy notes is considered to be racist socialization, internal racism, or even internal anti-Blackness. That is the learned helplessness, the literacy deprivation, distorted self-concept, or even aversion for our own groups, our own culture, our own norms and customs, the things that tie us to a larger ethnic heritage, even our own physical characteristics. And all of these trauma responses are deeply tied to post-traumatic slave syndrome. Now, while I can safely say I might not have directly experienced these behaviors, I have definitely witnessed them in both professional as well as public spaces. And I also know that we've created all types of cliches and metaphors, y'all, around these issues, such as terms like Uncle Tom's or all skin folk and kinfolk. And yes, there is definitely space to critique the Candace Owen types within our mix. But on a much deeper level, we have to face the reality that we all have been exposed to toxic messages about our community that flows as easily as our drinking water. Village women, tribal children, native language, something's missing. Ripping spirit, no religion. This is what we teach our children. The chapters we don't know. There's no ink to fill them. The visions of the soul need Stevie to see them. Stolen fruit. We need to realize that the constant racial terrorism and anti-Blackness that we've all been exposed to is so much more than simple racism. even though there is nothing simple about the racism we live through and negotiate every day of our lives. We need to activate what I would call a posture of demand. And we do this by reflecting on our own internalized anti-Blackness, which allows us to do the hard work of healing ourselves and future generations. I just want to hop out the morning color Porsche. Mellow yellow, blue dash, you got an ass like a horse. Purple tinted rims is spinning like amen. Like I'm in church. Sticky swervy, like I'm serving on my shirt. Communion in my cup. In 2020, after I left higher ed, I transitioned into another career trajectory. I was able to think critically and align myself with my passions and values. And I made more space for my own humanity, a humanity that had been constantly questioned due to both internalized as well as external anti-Blackness. I realized that I could not command what I didn't think I deserved. And once I was able to see my full humanity, it created opportunities to truly see others. Now, while walking away from traditional norms relating to work was tricky, I can say I'm now in a space where I am more connected to my own divine humanity and knowing. I am able to see more clearly the impacts of empire in my life and realize the value in my own embodied knowledge. And I have that threefold, y'all. One, I have ancestral knowing, the power of ancestral knowledge, the knowledge from my grandmother, Ruth Reed. And I tell folks, hey, I may not know what it means to be a Black woman living in the segregated South in the 1930s, but I was in the body of a Black woman who did. I have lived experience. My direct observations and experiences do matter. And I don't have to continuously rely on people outside of the community to give me credibility. And then lastly, if we gotta talk about it, I mean, I have a piece of paper from a white government institution that says I know how to read and write, y'all. Moreover, I was able to free myself from the prolonged presence of what our great ancestor Toni Morrison called the white gaze. In the documentary, Toni Morrison, The Pieces I Am, she refers to the white gaze as the little white man that sits on your shoulder and checks everything you say or do. Well, you sort of knock them off and then you're free. She further explains, I have had reviews in the past that have accused me of not writing about white people. I remember a review in which a reviewer said, one day she, meaning me, will have to face up to the real responsibilities and get mature and write about the real confrontation for Black people, which is white people. As though our lives have no meaning and no depth without the white gaze. I have spent my entire writing life trying to make sure that the white gaze was not the dominant one in any of my books. Ashe, dear Toni. Dr. Janice Gesem-Ashore expands here to even add more to Toni's righteous thoughts. In the simplest terms, the white gaze can be conceptualized as the assumed white reader. When writers craft stories, the assumed white and often cisgender heterosexual male audience that we are writing for, and two is the white gaze in action. The white gaze can be expanded to mean the ways in which whiteness dominates how we think and operate within society. Being encouraged to adhere to white-centered norms and standards is one of the ways the white gaze operates. And to create a world, and more specifically a workplace, that is built on equity, understanding the ways the white gaze show up is imperative. And it wasn't until I confronted my own internalized anti-Blackness that I realized how much of my life had been spent with that little white man on my shoulder. What's up, people? This is Mr. I don't need no damn script. This is Mr. Crush, make your mama blush. This is Mr. Let's Make a Deal. I keep it real. And I got something hot and heavy coming in for y'all from New Orleans' very own Tank and the Bangas, the Red Balloon album. When we start thinking about how we move forward, first things first, I want us to see our divine humanity. Now, Dr. Christina Cleveland published a book earlier this year called God is a Black Woman. And in that book, she cites, indeed, social science scholars agree that what's good for Black women is good for all people. The liberation of all Black women requires the dismantling of all systems of oppression: white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, and more. These systems harm all of us. So if Black women are thriving and free, it also means the oppressive systems have been eradicated and we are all thriving and free. The second thing we need to move forward is realize that we do need to stop catering and centering whiteness and its demands. And I love this quote from Levity that tells us we've all been socialized to often believe that white ice is always colder. Y'all, it ain't. And the last step as we consider moving forward into our whole humanity is that we must develop a posture of demand. Now, for me, this looked like learning about both the transatlantic and the domestic slave trades. It is from this deep knowing and knowledge that I was truly able to understand what is due to me as a Black woman living in an anti-Black world. In conclusion, it was easy to be done when I saw that BLM sign that day, because I knew that I deserved much more. But I only knew that because I had done the work of healing myself inside out. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to go out there and quit all the things, but I am encouraging us to be honest with ourselves about the ways we have been conditioned to negate our own humanity from within. Big bang, big tank, bang, bang, shots out. All of y'all can eat this up like Black folk at the cook out, thick and pretty from the South, money chasing after clout. Settle down, children, before I bring the paddle out. I got that juice, y'all, make the girls wanna move. Big.